Welcome to the Explosive Strength Podcast with Jared Binney. In this episode, we're going to go over how come we're so freaking screwed up on our thought process on strength and conditioning and weight training in general. I'm also going to cover some training methods and get into some more weekly shit that I have to deal with here at the gym. So anyway, here we go with another episode of the Explosive Strength Podcast. So basically, a lot of this stuff started after both world wars in the 1950s. The U.S. was trying to go more toward a cardiovascular doctrine, and Russia was going more toward strength and power. And for the strength and power thing, it was more, in some of the first Olympics, Russia sent cameramen, coaches, and scientists to try to figure out the Olympic Games, and they found out that most gold medals could be won in the anaerobic sports, the sports that have strength and power, track and field events, shot put, discus, sprinting, even wrestling, and the weightlifting events. And it was just basically a mathematical formula. If we could take care of these events, we could win more gold medals, hence win the Olympics. So they came back, started training, and trying to organize training in order to increase strength and power. And a famous track coach, Yuri Verkhoshansky, was over there, and he was snowed in off his tracks one day. So he couldn't take the athletes out there to do their normal track thing. So snowed in, but he did have access to a gym. The gym had barbells, boxes, and dumbbells. So he took those athletes in there and started weight training them. He had them squatting, jumping off and on boxes, and doing other things to strengthen the athletes. And after about 8 weeks, he noticed that these athletes were running faster, jumping higher, and jumping further than they ever have done before at even a much faster rate. And he said, man, I never thought about lifting weights to get stronger or even get faster. So lifting weights to get faster. And he said, man, they spent too much time doing their sport. They never did anything to kind of get better at their sport, which was the strength training. And so for them, they dominated the Olympic sports, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even up into the 90s. But it was not, a lot of people want to blame it on the drugs. The steroids and stuff were actually invented in the U.S., and the U.S. was actually the first to use the drugs in sport. But the Russians, and so after a while, everybody was using drugs and everything was leveled out, but the Russians were much better at strength conditioning and organizing strength conditioning than we were, because we were more towards, at the same time that the Russians were doing the strength and power thing, we were over here concerned with more of our cardiovascular health. In 1968, the aerobics term came about. Dr. Kenneth Cooper is actually the one that phrased the term aerobics. And he was more into running and distance. So he was an exercise physiologist, so he liked to run and stuff like that. And he was baffled that these strong-looking men could not really do the endurance events. They couldn't bike long distances, they couldn't run long distances, and they couldn't swim. And so that's kind of where the thought process, bigger makes you slower. It's going to make you're not trying. Running long distance is aerobic. Running short distance like sprints and the track and field events like the Russians are trying to do is called anaerobic. They don't need a lot of oxygen to get that event done. And so that's kind of where the process of big makes you slow starts coming into play. And so at the same time, being at his exercise physiology, he worked for universities, and so some of these other people working for these universities were more into running and things like that. So running for health and trying to do stuff like that. And so they came up with these aerobic exercises to try to improve our oxygen consumption and things like that. And what happened is also Stevie Prefontaine started coming on the scene in mid-70s. And so started winning. So then with the researchers, exercise physiologists doing the research, that's how the universities were starting getting their funds. So he was a runner, so he was starting to do more research on running and cardiovascular health. And so a lot of these professors were doing the same thing. And so not a lot of people were concerned with weight training or anything like that. And most of the knowledge that we had at that time for weight training was bodybuilding, because you had Arnold coming on the scene. And so with a mixture of Arnold and bodybuilding, that's kind of like Arnold was bigger and wouldn't be very well at the endurance events. So it's just kind of like, how all the big muscular stuff made you slower. You won't make you fast. You don't want to be muscle bound. Well, the bodybuilders were not concerned about human performance. They were concerned about building their bodies because that was their sport. And so a lot of that was started going on in the late 60s, early 70s. But another thing that was happening in the early 70s was Boyd Epley of Nebraska. He started doing strength conditioning for his athletes at Nebraska in 1969. In 1970 and 71, Nebraska won back-to-back national championships. And Epley was the first to use strength conditioning for the athletes. And after they won back-to-back national championships and started dominating football, strength and conditioning almost became a staple in the weight rooms for football programs. You know, football was the first to use strength conditioning or weight training to improve sport. And so what happened was everybody started getting buzzword, but the bad problem is that most of the knowledge came from bodybuilding. And so a lot of these coaches were just doing what they thought or gave their own personal opinion and started spreading the word, okay, this is what I did, so this is what I'm going to do, and things like that, you know. And that still happens today, you know, even when I was at University of Memphis. And this is kind of how it still gets even screwed up even more. I was going for my USAW weightlifting coaching certification, and so just the Olympic lifts, the clean and jerk, and all that other stuff. And so as I was getting my certification, we had a graduate assistant that was actually an intern in the weight room. He may actually been even an assistant strength coach in the weight room at Memphis. And so we was at Memphis, and we was taking this club certification course. Well, his power clean technique, he'd pick his feet up, slam them, and do some stuff that was a little different. And I knew right and wrong because when I was in high school, I was trained by a guy who trained 2 Olympians and 2 national championship teams. So when I was in high school, I seeked out stuff too because I've always wanted to be better at whatever I did. And so I was like, man, it's not right. So when we got to the certification course, the guy teaching the course would not pass him until he did it like the teacher of the course wanted him to do. Well, the bad part about that is he passed the course and whatever. We got back to Memphis. Guess how he taught them? He taught them how he was doing it, regardless of what his requirements were to pass the test. So it's just kind of like, okay, that's their thought process. So he was just passing his thought process on and this, whatever. So anyway, you take 4 athletes off that University of Memphis team, or it could be any team. And so if those coaches, so sometimes an athlete go off and be a coach at a high school. So you take 4 guys off that one team, go to teach different high schools. Well, there's a lot of kids coming through these high schools. So those kids at those high schools are going to be taught by that coach. And so what's happening is it's almost like an infectious disease. That coach started at Memphis, taught them wrong, where the kids at Memphis spread out and go to these different other high schools. Now they're teaching their kids how they were taught in college, which was all wrong. So then you've got a lot of people doing a lot of things wrong, and you got very few people out there that know how to do it right, but you got more people doing it wrong, so it makes the person doing it right look wrong. And that's what was starting to happen with the strength and conditioning in the 70s, is that these coaches kind of drew their own opinion. This is what I want to do, and just kind of made up exercises and had their athletes do it. And it got so out of hand that something had to be done. So in 1978, Epley came out with the National Coaches Association, and then I think that's right, in 1981, they changed the name from National Coaches Association to the National Strength and Conditioning Association. That started in 1981. So by the time we started cleaning crap up in the 80s, we were already 30 years behind the Russians as far as learning strength and power. And again, most of our knowledge was coming from bodybuilding in the US. So Epley was put together a panel, and we're trying to start educating people on the rights and for strength and conditioning, trying to organize it to where we were all more on the same page and the right path to a better future with this strength and conditioning stuff, especially with sport when you're dealing with these athletes. So that's kind of how we got screwed up, and we're still that way. So if you're a parent, your coach probably taught you the way they were taught in the 70s. And so it just keeps passing on. So that's why some of this stuff has got to be out there and debunked, because if you got a kid nowadays, his coach is 50, 60 years old, is coaching his kid, well, guess how that 50, 60-year-old coach learned? Unless he's learned and passed on and got some more education between now and then. You know, I don't do the same thing I did 4 and 5 years ago here at the gym. I have to keep learning. I always want to try to help someone and improve them. So that's basically how we got kind of screwed up on our thought process, is just like that. So, and I don't mean to keep harping on it, but anyway, let's move on. So now let's get into some training methods, and these training methods actually came from Russia, because Louis Simmons of Westside Barbell, you'll hear the word nowadays called conjugate training. All conjugate training is combining different methods of muscle tension or training methods, and can join those methods to produce a desired result, instead of choosing one for this and one for that and whatever. So what they've learned is, if you can conjoin the methods, and I'm going to get into that, how it all plays into this Russian thing, is that you'll produce a much better athlete. Or you can even do it for strength athletes. You can do it for just powerlifters. You can do it for basically whatever, but it's the idea of learning how to use the methods, and I'm going to try to give you some ideas of how to do that. So anyway, Louis Simmons broke his back like 3 times and had some training issues. He's like, man, there's got to be something better. And if you just go to Westside Barbell, you can type in Louis Simmons or whatever and watch him on YouTube or even his podcast, and he could tell the story a lot better than I can. But he broke his back 3 times. He said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And so, digging in books and research, he came across some of these Russian manuals. And what he found was that there are 3 main methods of muscular tension. You got your maximum effort method, you got your dynamic effort method, and you got your repetition method. And so let's cover them in that order. Let's go to the maximum effort method. These are the methods that he kind of learned from to help him now produce the strongest gym in the world. And so he's using it toward powerlifting. I'm going to try to help my people use it toward more of an athletic thing. So anyway, you have your max effort method. Max effort method is basically maxing out. 1 rep max. And the thing with the 1 rep max is all motor neurons, big, medium, and small, are all fired at optimal discharge frequency. Immediately, boom, firing at once. Because if you need a quick, explosive athletic reaction, all your fibers have to fire at once. And so with maxing out, motor units firing at once, you're building coordination. You got intermuscular coordination, which is all the muscles in the body coordinating together, and you got intramuscular coordination, which is within the same muscle cell itself. So you got not only the prime muscle being trained, you got all the other muscles coordinating and firing at the same time. So your nervous system is getting optimal stimulus for creating coordination, and that's good for all ages. Okay, and so where I'm going to get a little may confuse some of you is you also have your max effort method, which is actually 1 rep max. Okay, but sometimes these kids, they need more of a stimulus than 1 rep max. So what we'll do here at the gym is we'll use the brief maximal tension method, which is a sub-max method, but it still falls in the category of maximum effort training because it's max effort intensities. So we'll use, and max effort's 1, the sub-max is between 3 to 5 reps. And research shows over and over that greater than 6 reps will hinder strength development. And so, and if you notice this, a lot of power lifters will bench more than the bodybuilders, but they have less, bench more and have less pec tears. Bodybuilders actually have more tears in the muscles than do the power lifters. And that's because once you're doing reps to failure, you kind of get out of position, because you're getting out of position in a fatigue state, which could equal disaster. So that's why here at Explosive Mechanics, we don't do the repetition method usually with our bench, our squat, or our main lifts. We usually use that with our accessory work. And so the brief maximal tension method allows for a quick muscular contraction. So if you're looking for just boom, quick burst of energy, explosive action, the maximum effort and the sub-max method will help develop that. Not only that's the key, that's how we're also able to develop this athletic strength without increasing muscular size. So the brief maximal tension method and the max effort method will allow you to gain the greatest strength qualities with little increase in muscular size. And so that's basically the max effort method, and I'm going to tell you how that's going to tie all in. These 3 different methods are going to tie all in together. Now, I call the max effort method, brief maximal tension method, that's your power. That's where you're gaining your strength. That's where you're gaining your coordination. that's where you're able to produce more force at a quicker rate, or more force. And so that's your power. And how you're going to develop your power at a quicker rate is your dynamic effort method. So the dynamic effort method is when you move submax light weights at the fastest speed possible. So it could be with a jump, it could be with a run, it could be with a throw, it could be a med ball throw, it could be something like that. And there's sub entities of the dynamic effort method. You can use load release, heavy light, plyometrics. Those all still fall up under the dynamic effort method because they're all moving something at a rapid rate of speed. And so sometimes people will get confused, and that's why we don't do speed squats here. The dynamic effort method is the skill that you're trying to enhance. So am I trying to enhance the squat skill all the time? No, I'm mainly concerned with jumping. If I can increase an athlete's jumping ability, jumping is correlated with running, so I can increase their running speed. So I can take care of running and jumping by doing the jumps and not worried about doing the dynamic effort on squat. The thing about the dynamic effort method is it enhances your rate of force development, how quickly you can develop force in a short period of time. But it will not build strength. It will not build strength because the bar or the implement that you have moves too fast to create enough tension to create the strength. And so if you look at the force velocity curve, it moves too fast to create enough whatever. So I won't get in that. So I don't want to get sidetracked. Anyway, so that's why power cleans at school don't work to make them stronger. And they don't make you strong because the bar moves too fast to create enough muscular tension to create strain. You got to create strain to create strength. So what happens is a lot of times at these high schools, you see these high schools wanting to use power cleans to make them better. Well, power cleans is bad exercise? No, but if done wrong, yes. So what happens is a lot of these coaches still today have the bodybuilding rep range 5 or higher, 6 or higher, or whatever. So these kids are going into school doing 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 5, or even 4 sets of 5, 4 sets of 6. Or I even heard some kids do up to 10 reps on power cleans. The thing with power cleans is a rate of force development exercise. And if you get hooked up to a Tendo unit, and if you notice after the first 3 reps, your bar velocity starts to slow. So if you're trying to teach speed and your body's going to learn averages, as the bar velocity slows, you're learning the average. You're not learning that 0.8 meters or 0.9 meters per second. And I was talking to a guy the other day. The reason your squat's not going up by doing speed squats like Louis does, that's the speed squatting is Louis' skill that they're trying to use to increase their squat. But the bar moves too fast to create strength. All they're using it for is to create a rapid rate of force development. The quicker they can generate force, it's easier it is for them to get to through their sticking point and finish out their squat. Because when they squat down, they're mainly lifting in briefs and squat suits, so they got press, compress, compress, press. They have to build acceleration real quick to get through that sticking point to where the briefs are not actually helping as much. So that speed squat is sharpening their skill. It's not making them stronger, it's just making them faster. And so you use your strength exercises to make you stronger, and you have these things like depth jumps, dumbbell jumps, box jumps, and different things to make you more explosive or faster at what you're doing. So you're working on speed with the dynamic effort stuff. And so the max effort method gives you the power to produce greater speed. You know, like you got these little kids that come here, they don't want to, or their parents don't want them to freaking lift weights. Well, you know what? You can go from 30 inches to 33 inches, probably by not lifting weights at all, just working on jump, because jumping's the skill. But the problem with that is you're not going to go from 33 to 36. You may be good, but you'll never be great. You have to increase your power. Then you have to go to your dynamic effort method and work on sharpening that skill, and jumping's the skill. So you may take your kid and you want to throw a baseball. They may improve their baseball throw from 60 to 65, but to get to 70, they're going to have to do something else. They're going to have to increase their power. And just like if you're running a track, and people heard me talk about before, those who squat 2.1 times their body weight are significantly faster than those who do not. And if you do squat that, and you do not, just because you're strong don't mean you'll be fast. That's why you have to use the dynamic effort method to help with being fast and work on your rate of force development so that you can produce the strength to make the power that you need. So anyway, you got to take your max effort method, get strong. You take your dynamic effort method, work on your rate of force development. And the third method I mentioned was the repetition method. And so with the repetition method, I call it the glue, because it's kind of like if I give you an example of if a car is stuck in a ditch and I were to go pull out that car. So you got car A and you got car B. Car A is the power, car B is your dynamic effort method, which is the skill, and the thing holding them together is your repetition method. And so if I was going to pull the car B out with car A and my cable is the size of my pinky finger, that cable is going to snap. So the whole trick with everything is increasing your power as much as you can, increasing your skill as much as you can, but then adding a little bit of size, so I increase the size of that cable so that when I put force to that skill, that we don't have any break or any injuries. So with the repeated effort method, it's basically the bodybuilding method. It's how you make the fibers bigger in order to handle enough force or the force being applied to them. So the repetition method would help you or prevent you from getting injured. And so, like I said, we don't do the repeated effort method or the repetition method on our bench or squat. We usually save that for maybe our 45 back raises, our good mornings, our reverse hypers, even our lunges, our reverse lunges, and things of that nature, our press downs, our pull downs. So we take all the other exercises that everybody wants to skip, and those are our repetition methods. So those are the key components that we need to get stronger in order to hold us together so that we don't get injured as we become more explosive. And so, and the rep range for the repetition method is generally 6 to 12, and you want to go to muscle failure because you need to. The thing about the repetition method is, and why it will not work, you'll have some kids that will go, you want to go to failure because you're going to fire your slowed fibers, your moderate fibers, and then your fast fibers in a sequential order. Unlike the max effort method where everything's boom, fired at once, creating a quick first step, the repeat effort method, the big fibers, the fast twitch fibers, only recruited in a fatigue state. So that's why you'll have some kids at school, they'll get to like 185 and they can't get to 200 because the repetition method that they often use, which is usually 6, 8, or even 10 reps, they're learning stuff firing in a sequential order and never become explosive. That's why they don't really get much faster. That's why they don't really get much stronger. It's because they're not developing the power in order to move. They're doing the repeated effort method. Just like I was going to get about the power cleans, they're learning averages. When you're working on your dynamic effort method, it's basically if you flip the reps. So if they were doing, and the problem with the schools, they'll do 3 sets of 8. That's a repeated effort method. But if they were to flip it and do 8 sets of 3, that would be the dynamic effort method because they're trying to move that weight on the power clean as fast as possible, but sometimes they get them too weight because they think the power cleans are a strength exercise when it's not. It's a rate of force development exercise. Lower the weight, measure bar speeds, and get that done and move on. 8 sets of 3. The thing is, if they're thinking 8 sets, man, that's going to take all day. Well, some of these schools are limited to 45 minutes for weight training class. They may not have enough time. Well, you can go over there and jump. And what they don't realize is the Olympic athletes overseas, they don't do power cleans to make them more explosive. They jump to make them more explosive. And so a lot of this stuff is kind of backwards over here, but I think that's because of the education that we've learned from the bodybuilding and things, and that's just kind of what we know. And sometimes we are pressed with time to where we can't get all that stuff done. And so if they just pick an exercise or two and get it done, or skip the curls. It's called minimum effective dosage. What can I give these athletes? What's the least number of exercises I can give these athletes and get something out of it? And sometimes if they give them too much, they're not going to recover for the next workout day. And so minimum effective dosage. So the least amount I can give to get the best possible result. Sometimes if you give them too much, they don't recover and they have a crap workout their second time. So that's the repeat effort method. It's basically the glue that holds you together. So like when we're doing these dumbbell jumps, we're getting our power from our squats. We're working on our rate of force development with our jumps, also our tread sled. But if our power don't go up with our squatting, so if our leg strength's not getting it, we're not going to move that tread sled faster. We're not going to be able to jump off the ground with heavier weights. So you've got to combine, but we're not going to jump. So if you, like I said earlier, if you work on your power and you don't enhance your skill, you're going to be behind. So if you work on your skill, like these kids want to come in here and they just want to jump all the time. Yeah, that's the fun stuff. But if they come in here and they just jump, 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 and they don't work on the power, they may be that kid that goes from 30 to 33 and never get to 40. That's because they're lacking the power. So the power is your ceiling. So how high do you want your ceiling to go in order to get from point A to point B? But you may have a person that has significant amount of strength. They may be able to squat 2.1 to 2.3 times their body weight, but they're only jumping to 32 or 33 inch vertical. They need more rate of force development exercises. And so I think with the thing when Louis brought all this stuff to light is he was training it for a sport of powerlifting. So what skill do you want to enhance is what you use the dynamic effort method for. Enhancing for us is jumps, because jumps help our run. So if we can jump, we're more explosive. And if we can run, if we can jump higher, we're also going to run much faster. And so then we use the repetition method, like for our 45 hyper, our reverse hyper, our lower back work, makes our lower back stronger. So when we're jumping off the ground and landing with significant forces, our backs are not subjected to get injured. And so, and if we work our stabilizers and stuff like when we bench, if we work our triceps, our shoulders are less likely to get injured. And so that's kind of how these three methods help each other. And that's kind of what Louis brought to the US and started popularizing. And he's not saying do it like he does. He's just trying to tell you ideas so you can figure out how to go from point A to point B. So that's the whole point. So we understand how we got screwed up in history. Now we understand the three methods and how to use them, or basically, and I'm going to go back through this and try to figure out, I may have to do a recap because I may have missed some things. But anyway, so you got your power, you got your skill, and you got your glue. That's basically the max effort, the dynamic effort, and the repeated effort method. Those are three main methods of muscular tension. And so with that, you're able to increase basically whatever you want as long as you can organize it in a fashion that you want. So anyway, if you have any questions, you can always email me, call me, or do whatever. So now let's get into weekly shit. Monday. All right. Frequency and catching others. I got some kids that will come in here sometimes and they're behind. And I said, look, you know, it's the difference between 3 days a week and 2 days a week. You know, like when we're doing our training, I'm still trying to squat my people 3 days a week. We're not taking a day off. We're going to try to squat, and we may use the submax or the brief maximal tension method a lot more to increase our squat. Sometimes we may not use the max effort, the single max all the time. We'll use the max effort to test where we are, but being that we can get the same intensities and basically the same effect out of the brief maximal tension method, we'll probably use that more often because we're still falling in within those intensities to create the neural drive in order to create more explosive power without increasing muscular size, and hence being more athletic. Because if you can increase your strength without increasing your weight, and all athletics are, how strong are you relative to your body weight? If I'm stronger and my body weight stays the same, I'm going to run faster. If I'm stronger and I can, and I'll be able to jump higher if my body weight stays the same. So increasing strength without increasing unnecessary size, you do need some size in order to hold the skill to the power, but you don't need to increase unnecessary size. And sometimes that's what people do, and that's kind of where we get, oh man, I don't want to get big and bulky. And that's what kind of all started this freaking podcast in the first place, is I still get parents who will come in and say, I don't want to get bulky. And so I'm told, hey, Jerry, don't get frustrated. Just try to educate. So hence podcast. Anyway, training frequency and catching others. So like if you're behind, and if you're listening to this and you squatting twice a week, if you can squat 3 days a week, squat 3 days a week. At the end of 2 months, if you squat 3 days a week, that's 24 squat workouts. If you squat twice a week, it's going to take you 3 months to get 24 workouts. And if you're squatting 3 times a week for 4 months, that's 48 workouts. And so in 4 months, you get 48 workouts, but if you're doing twice a week and 6 months, it's going to take you 6 months to get there. So it's going to take you 2 months longer by going twice per week. You know, and if you can't handle it, you can't handle it. The younger kids can handle more frequent, but the older kids sometimes can't. So as my kids are squatting 500 to 600 pounds, I sometimes have to back them down to twice a week because they're getting too beat up from the stress. Because as they've gotten a lot stronger, they learn how to strain and put a lot more into it. So sometimes the little kids don't know how much to put into it, and so they're not getting as stressed out of it. So anyway, And so I was trying to tell the kid the other day, look, and I tried to jot this down to him. I said, look, if you got someone that's 10 pounds stronger than you and you're trying to catch them, and they're only coming twice a week, look, you can be a month ahead of them. You can actually go from a month behind to a month ahead in about 4 months if you really work at it. And so, and some of these kids, I don't want to come every day, Jared. Well, I had also a kid tell me the other day, hey, Jared, I want to get big, but I don't want to lift weights. I said, whatever. So I mean, it's kind of freaking nutty. So anyway, that's some shit I got to deal with. I'm just trying to help them and try to plan it out. But that's too much. I don't really want to do that. So too much. What's too much? You know, you hear these parents, I don't want to give my kid too much. The only way you know what too much is if you experiment and know what too much is, and not just think you know what too much is. And so don't worry about that. Let's handle all that and get that over with. Oh, jeez. No warm up, just get straight to it. So like when the kids come to the gym, everybody's got a handwritten folder by me. I write everybody's sets, I write everybody's reps, I write my expectations down, I got goals for them. And it's tracked over 12 workouts, so I can look back 12 workouts to see the pattern of where we're going and where we need to go in order to get what we need to get done. And so I had this kid come in here, and I said, all right, y'all start your warm-ups. And we're gonna start so if we start at 4 o'clock, all right, we're gonna start our first set at 4:10. And kid goes over there immediately, he's got 135 for the day. He automatically goes over there, throws on 135. I wouldn't pay attention because I was watching some other people warm up. All right, y'all ready for your first set? Hey, you ready for your first set over here? Jared already did my first set. I said, did you warm up? No. I said, what the freak? I said, his bench max is 150 and he starts at 135 without a warm up. I said, who does that? He said, we don't warm up at school. I said, well, I told y'all to warm up. I said, the times before you've come in here, I made you do this, this, and that. He goes, well, I don't need to warm up. And so it's just kind of like, yeah, you do. And I told him, I start with a freaking bar. I go from the bar to 135 to 225 and so forth and so on. Warming up, just getting the joints moving. Sometimes when these kids don't warm up, especially once they've been here for a while and they've gotten trained, I can look at the pattern of their numbers in their folders and know whether they warmed up or not. So if I want you to, our first set, if we're doing 5 sets of 5, that first set of 5 sets of 5 is a mother. And so if I see that they got 4, then the next set they got 5, it means they didn't rest long enough or they didn't warm up. So yeah, if they missed the first rep, they didn't warm up or they didn't warm up like they should have. And I had a kid coming here the other day, actually did the same freaking thing. I was just trying to explain. He got a 4 on his first set and he got a 5. He said, Jed, I'm still trying to figure out this warm-up thing. So I actually, today is our bench day, so I actually wrote in his folder today how I want him to warm up. So we're gonna see what happens with that. And so I just kind of got off on a rant with the warm-up, but they don't do that stuff, you know, and they get to choose their own weights and stuff. Jared, I did this at school. You know, it's no programming, you know, they're just kind of going in and choosing their own weight and doing what they want to do. Where here I'm going to be regulating the numbers and make sure that they're doing what they should be doing. Now, if they're moving the bar faster, I can look at the bar. That's moving faster than what I wrote down for. Then I can adjust the weights. Then that's the whole thing about having me involved is I'm watching and I can see the bar speeds. That's a lot easier for him than it was. So now let's make adjustments on the fly. Let's take notes in your folder so that now we go from point A to point B. Like I said, sometimes I get people to bench their bench max for 3 reps after 3 weeks of training, and sometimes I can get a kid to beat their best bench max just by some type of technical change. So anyway, warm up, take time. I mean, I used to be that kid, but as I've gotten older, I've learned, and I'm trying to take this knowledge that I've learned from all my other mistakes to pass on to help them. And let's go on to Wednesday. Like Wednesday kind of ties to Tuesday because I was like, damn, some of these little kids are not strong enough to appreciate. Jared, can we go? Jared, can we go? What happens is when we come into the gym, a lot of stuff is, if we're gonna start our first set at 4:10, based off whoever's in the gym. So if I got my high schoolers coming in at 4, it's gonna be based off more of the strongest person in the gym. And if you look at the research, and I think this is where a lot of coaches and stuff fall wrong too, is rest between sets. So if I got someone lifting sets of 5 or sets of 3, depending on where we are, if they're missing their sets or if they're missing the reps, I don't allow them to take off weight. So if I want you to do 225, 5 sets of 5, and you go 4, like that kid did the other day, he didn't go down in weight. We stayed at 225, then he got a 5 on the second set, then another 5, then a 4, and then a 4. So there's kind of like we went 4, 5, 5, 4, 4. And so by us or me dictating the rest periods allowed him to get more reps. So if you're missing reps, don't take off weight, just rest longer. And I think a Charles Poliquin book actually did the research, and I accidentally found this out on my own. I was benching one day and I was doing heavy sets of 3 at 365 or 405, somewhere above 365, 405, or somewhere in that range. The weight don't matter. What happened is I got distracted and I was helping a kid. I was like, oh shit, now I got to go bench. Man, that set was easier at last set. And I looked down at my stopwatch. I had done rested 6.5 minutes. And so my next set, I only rested 3.5, and I barely got my reps. I said, damn, that's what. And so then my next set, I rested another 6.5 to 7 minutes, and that set was easier. So I learned just by accident and doing the stuff myself is that when I rested longer between my sets, my reps were easier. And I talked about this on like the last episode or the episode before. I rest longer, and I've even tried to work on my muscular endurance so I wouldn't have to rest as long. But no matter what I've tried to do, even I went 2 months working on muscular endurance, I still have to rest longer rest periods in order to get my reps at the higher weight. And so I learned that resting longer. Then, a little while back, I read a Poliquin book, and it talked about rest periods. If you're at 90% above, you may be resting 5 to 8 minutes between sets. I said, damn, I was doing that and I didn't even know it. So sometimes when I have read some of these books and things, I was actually doing what the book said without even reading the book. And sometimes going back and reading some of these books is just reaffirming, damn, I am on the right path. And so now all I'm trying to do is help and teach these kids. And some of these kids, they're not strong enough to appreciate the rest period. You know, if you're benching 65 pounds, you probably only need a minute to a minute and a half to get your reps. And somebody like when you're that weak, you don't engage all of your nervous system. Like if I did a set of 20 on squat, I'd be on the freaking floor. If you got a little let's say 12-year-old kid, they said 20, they're up saying what's next. And so it depends on, as you get stronger, you learn how to get more engaged, you got more fiber activation. I mean, they may only be activating less than 50% of their fibers, where I'll be activating 80% of my fibers, yet causing me more fatigue because I've learned how to strain, I've learned how to get stronger. So that's something I've had to deal with as kids are not appreciating the rest. They don't realize that the rest messes with them. So like once I do have someone that's stronger, I'll show them, all right, it's a short rest break, and their reps are harder, so let's rest longer to this next set. So like by their 4th or 3rd set, that's easier, and they're like, man, resting longer does work. So I'm trying to teach them as we go. And so sometimes if I got someone that's super strong in the gym, I may let them go by themselves instead of rolling with the count of the gym, because like me, I can't work out with these people because I need about 6.5 minutes to make sure I get my reps. I'd rather get my reps than miss them. And so like I did an experiment like the other day, I was benching 285. I did sets of 4 with 285 with 80 pounds of chain. So I had 40 pounds of chain on each side, and I was doing a medium close grip, and I was going to do sets of 4. So I did 4, 4, 4, and my last set I only got 3, but I was keeping my rest breaks to 2.5, maybe 3 minutes. And then the next time I came in, I had to do 315, double chain on each side, 80 pounds of chain total, 315. I had sets of 3. I rested 6.5 minutes. I got all sets of 3 at a much heavier weight. And so if some people out there are struggling with their strength gains, start paying attention to your rest breaks and rest periods in between your sets and see what happens. So anyway, I hope I covered the information that I wanted to, a little bit of history, how we kind of got screwed up, some methods so that you can understand how they all tie together, and just some weekly shit. So anyway, if you have any questions, please email me at info@explosivemechanics. Follow me on Instagram @explosivemechanics, Twitter @explosivemec. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.